Lily's whisper brushed the quiet like a moth's wing. "Grandma, they went to see someone about your money." Her 9-year-old face was pale in the nightlight. For half a heartbeat, Margaret Hale forgot how to breathe. "What did you hear, sweetheart?" she asked, smoothing the blanket, keeping her voice level. "I got water last night," Lily said, glancing at the hall. "Mom and Dad were in Dad's office. He said you're too old to handle everything. They found a lawyer who can take charge so things don't get messed up." "Grown-up talk can sound scary," Margaret murmured, tucking the stuffed rabbit under Lily's arm. "Nothing for you to worry about tonight." She kissed her forehead and slipped into the hallway. The banister felt cool under her fingers as the first tremor passed through her. 68 isn't fragile, she thought. She'd paid for Olivia's extravagant wedding, helped with a down payment on the two-big house, covered Lily's school tuition, and quietly bailed out emergencies that arrived with the regularity of utility bills. She had told herself busy adult children simply had busy lives. Gratitude had been her tax for being included. Her phone chimed. A text from Olivia hoped Lily's not a handful. "Our meetings are going great. Big changes ahead." I'm sure Margaret typed back. "When are you home Sunday night?" She set the phone down, crossed to the kitchen, and opened the drawer where the practical things lived: batteries, warranty slips, tape. Beneath the order lay a card she hadn't touched in years. Charles Benton, family attorney, executor of James's estate. 10 p.m. was indecent for business, but this wasn't business. Margaret Charles answered on the third ring. "Everything all right?" "I think I need help," she said, and told him what Lily had overheard. He was silent long enough for the clock to tick twice. "If accurate, that's serious. I'll come to you." 9 a.m. after Lily leaves for school. Morning found Margaret composed coffee-made paper stacked on the dining table. Charles arrived with his leather folio and the cautious eyes of a man who has seen too many families set themselves on fire. "Tell me what you suspect," he said. "They're planning to have me declared unfit," Margaret replied. "Is that even possible?" "Yes," he said. "It's called guardianship or conservatorship. A determined petitioner can build a case, especially if there's a paper trail suggesting confusion or poor judgment. Have they been urging you to simplify things? Offering to help with finances?" Margaret's mouth tightened. "Olivia suggested I sell the house. Daniel asked to organize my records. Their accountant filed my taxes this year as a favor. Did you review before signing?" She hesitated, not carefully. "Then we start here." Charles opened his folio. 2 tracks. First, we document your capacity with independent medical and financial evaluations. Second, we audit your paperwork. For an hour they worked. Bank statements, quarterly reports, tax returns, letters routed to an unfamiliar P.O. box, an investment account Margaret didn't remember opening. Twice she paused over signatures that looked like hers if you squinted. Charles separated a small pile from the rest. "These concern me," he said. "New accounts, address changes, authorizations you likely didn't intend. If someone wants control, these documents help tell a story. Mom's overwhelmed. We're stepping in." The words settled like cold ash. "How long would they need to make this stick?" she asked. "Months to prepare. And Margaret, when did you last update your will?" "After James died, I meant to, but Olivia is my only child. It never felt urgent." "It's urgent now," he said gently. "We'll restructure it so your wishes are insulated from family pressure. Also, we'll add safeguards: who decides capacity under what standards, and what happens if anyone tries to interfere." She exhaled slow and even the way James had taught her when the chemo made him breathe like a drowning man. "Do it. Today," Charles said. "I'll also arrange a neurologist and a forensic accountant, people the court respects. Meanwhile, freeze any large transfers unless you're there in person and change where sensitive mail is delivered." Margaret nodded the first clean line of a plan, drawing itself in her mind. She walked Charles to the door, then paused, listening to the quiet house. The street outside was the same one where she had taught Olivia to ride a bike. Continuity could be a trap, she thought, the feeling that nothing truly changes because the wallpaper hasn't moved. In the kitchen, she brewed a fresh pot of coffee she didn't need and set her pen to paper. A list formed: bank holds, safe deposit box, inventory of valuables, passwords, locks, conversations to postpone until the right room and the right witness. By the time Lily's school bus groaned to the curb, the tremor in Margaret's hands had gone. "They think I'm an easy mark," she thought, sliding the list into a folder. "Let's see how they handle a moving target." The morning arrived with the unblinking clarity of a hospital corridor. Margaret woke before the alarm, showered, and dressed in the navy sweater James used to call her board meeting armor. She brewed coffee she barely sipped and lined up folders on the dining table as if they were chess pieces. When the school bus hissed to a stop outside, Lily waved from the window with both hands all elbows and grins. The bus turned the corner, the house exhaled. Charles Benton pulled into the driveway at 8:56 punctuality, telegraphed by a neatly folded umbrella and the old-fashioned leather folio tucked beneath his arm. He assessed the spread on the table: bank statements, tax returns, clipped correspondence. then looked at Margaret the way a seasoned pilot checks the weather and his engines in the same glance. "I've scheduled an independent neurologic evaluation for this afternoon," he said, laying out a crisp itinerary. "Dr. Priya Mehta, no nonsense, widely respected. Tomorrow morning, a meeting with Franklin Ung, forensic accountant. We'll also sign updated estate documents by day's end." "Let's do it," Margaret replied, surprised at the steadiness of her own voice. Charles lifted a paperweight, the glass globe James had loved, and set it aside. 2 immediate safeguards. First, put transaction holds on your accounts, no transfers over 1,000 without your in-person authorization. Second, redirect sensitive mail, preferably to my office. "I already drafted a list," she said, sliding him a page with tidy bullets. "Hold safe deposit box inventory of valuables, password changes, replacing the door locks, and... She hesitated, then continued. "A private investigator. Someone in Las Vegas who can document what Olivia and Daniel are actually doing." Charles didn't flinch. "Good. I'll connect you with Eleanor Sullivan. No relation to you before you ask. Licensed in Nevada, clean record, reasonable discretion. One more item, start a contemporaneous log. Everything you do, everyone you speak with, time-stamped. It's boring. It's gold in court." They drove to the bank first, where the manager, Mr. Ruiz, whom Margaret had known since his teller days, stepped out from behind the glass offices as if summoned by the past. He listened, at expression growing taut. Within minutes, he had added alerts to every account required, in-branch authentication for anything large or unusual, and arranged a larger safe deposit box. "Dual keys," he said, handing her a new metal tag. "And I'll accompany you personally when you need access. I'll also flag any inquiries on your accounts that come through third parties, even if they claim to be accountants or family." "Thank you, Javier," Margaret said, using his first name the way people do when they mean it. Back in the car, she phoned the number Charles had texted. "Sullivan Investigations," a woman answered in a clean, unhurried voice. "This is Margaret Hale. Charles Benton recommended you." "Understood," the woman said. "How can we help?" "I need to know who my daughter and son-in-law are meeting in Las Vegas. They told my granddaughter they're seeing a lawyer about taking control of my finances. I want lawful documentation, names, times, topics, anything public or one-party consent." "We specialize in public space recordings and corroboration," Sullivan replied. "No hotel room nonsense. Nevada allows one-party recordings in many settings. We'll keep it legal. Text me their hotel approximate schedule and photos if you have them." Margaret forwarded a wedding photo, Olivia and Lace Daniel in a tux, both beaming. She stared at the image a moment longer than she meant to after she hit send. At noon, she sat in a quiet examination room, while Dr. Mehta, a woman with kind eyes and a metronome's calm, explained the process. "This isn't about trick questions," the neurologist said. "It's about function." Over the next hour, Margaret drew intersecting pentagons, listed months, backward learned and recalled word sets, followed multi-step instructions, interpreted proverbs, described the meaning of abstract designs, and handled a quick series of financial judgment scenarios. When she paused, it wasn't because she was lost. It was because she refused to answer until she was certain. "You're scoring in this very high range for your age, Doctor," Mehta said at last, tapping her notes. "No evidence of cognitive impairment, and your executive function is excellent. I'll finalize a formal report by morning. Please include something about my ability to manage my own finances," Margaret said. "Not just memory. The people in my life will interpret selectively." Interpret. I've already drafted the language in my head. Dr. Mehta smiled. "I'll also note you drive live, independently manage medications and navigate complex tasks." Outside, Charles checked his watch. At 9 sharp tomorrow," he said. "This afternoon, let's review your estate plan." In his office, the fluorescent lights hummed like a practical hymn. Margaret sat with a pen designed to feel heavier than a lie. Charles slid the draft of a revocable living trust across the desk. "Key features," he said. "You're the trustee while competent. If capacity is questioned, a panel determines it. A neurologist, your primary care physician, and an independent geriatric psychiatrist. Unanimous required. Successor trustee, not a family member. I recommend an institutional trustee. I've listed 3. Distribution is separate to education and support trust for Lily until at least age 30. Olivia and Daniel receive no direct distributions during your lifetime and are subject to a no contest clause thereafter." Margaret read every line. At no contest clause, she stopped. "If they challenge, they forfeit." "Correct. It's enforceable here. It discourages exactly what they may be contemplating." "Good," she said. "Print it." While the assistants prepared signature packets, Charles added one more page. "A HIPAA authorization naming me and the successor trustee so we can obtain your medical records if we need to prove capacity. Also a durable financial power of attorney, but it only springs into effect with that same unanimous capacity determination." "I understand," she said. "I won't give them a crack to pry open." They signed. The notary stamped, paper turned into architecture. Late afternoon, the first text came from Sullivan Investigations. Subject verified at Green and Barron, LL Elder Law. Consultation lasted 48 minutes. Lobby audio captures keywords: temporary conservatorship, emergency petition, asset protection, trust. 10 minutes later, dinner at Aurelia. Table conversation in public space references assisted living, house sale, Swiss Academy for Lily. Clean recordings attached to link. Margaret's knuckles whitened around her phone until the bones announced themselves. She walked to the sink, turned on the cold water, and let the shock run through her fingers and into the drain. Then she forwarded the message to Charles with a single line: "We proceed." Evening brought Lily back with a backpack full of glue stick art and the world's stickiest granola bar. "Grandma," she said, between enthusiastic updates about spelling words and kickball, "can we make hot chocolate?" "We can do better than that," Margaret said, already fetching the saucepan. "We can make it the way your grandfather did, with a pinch of salt and patience." She stirred while Lily counted marshmallows aloud as if she were auditing a small firm. After homework, Margaret pulled out a notebook and began her log. 6:12 p.m. spoke with Sullivan. Recordings confirm elder law consult. 7:05 p.m. Lily read 3 pages without help. Placed bedtime at 8:15. 9:10 p.m. Changed passwords for bank and email. She wrote like a clerk with a future judge in mind. Saturday dawned with purpose. Margaret printed copies of the bank holds, the appointment confirmations, Dr. Mehta's preliminary letter, and a draft affidavit Charles had prepared in case they needed to move quickly. She called a locksmith, choosing a firm Charles recommended. "Replace the front and back door cylinders," she said. "Add a deadbolt to the garage entry. Install an electronic keypad by the kitchen, today if possible." "Today is possible," the dispatcher said. 2:00. At 9, she arrived at Franklin Ng's office. Franklin had the careful hands of someone who never tore a page. He asked for her tax returns for the last 3 years, bank statements, monthly investment reports, and any correspondence with accountants. Then he made a grid that could have doubled as a chessboard. "Look here," he said, sliding a highlighted page across. "A Form 1099 from an investment firm you've never used tied to a P.O. box. Authorization to change your mailing address for certain notices, signed with a signature that's almost yours. The F curls at a different angle." Margaret leaned in. "How does someone even do that?" Slowly, he said. "Over months. They help you with taxes, they simplify statements, they manage tiny accounts you barely register, and they establish small irregularities that later can be pointed to as evidence you were confused. It creates a narrative, overwhelmed parent, dutiful children rescuing her." Franklin drafted a formal memo. No evidence of diminished capacity affecting financial management. Evidence of third-party interference, irregular address changes, potential forgery indicators. He promised a notarized version by Monday with exhibits. When Margaret stepped back into the day, she felt both hollowed and fortified. She drove to the houseware store and bought 2 inexpensive plastic bins and a stack of velvet pouches. She stopped by the bank to check the new safe deposit box and placed inside the original of Dr. Mehta's letter copies of Sullivan's summaries, the fresh trust documents, and a handwritten inventory she had started James's watch collection, grandmother's silver Tiffany lamp, first edition's chess set. By the time Lily bounced off the bus, the locksmith's van was in the driveway. "Are we getting secret code locks?" Lily asked, eyes wide. "We are getting secure locks," Margaret corrected gently, which did nothing to dampen Lily's excitement. "Does it need a password like my tablet? Can I help pick it?" "What if bad guys?" "Passwords are for grown-ups," Margaret said, smiling. "But I may need your help with something else." The locksmith finished. The new keypad blinked quietly by the kitchen door. Margaret paid and filed the receipt in her log. When the van left, she sat next to Lily at the kitchen table. "How would you feel about a treasure catalog?" Margaret asked. "Not a hunt. A catalog. We're going to make a list of special things in the house and where they live, like a museum does." Lily gasped. "Like the little cards next to paintings." "Exactly." Margaret pulled out index cards and a thin marker. "We'll write the name, the story, and where it belongs. And then we'll take a picture of it in its proper home so we always remember." They worked for an hour, Lily scribbling titles with solemn authority. Blue lamp entry table from Grandpa to Grandma, 30th anniversary, chess set den. Grandpa taught Mom here. Books, living room first editions, do not touch with jam hands. They photographed each item in place, and then when Lily wasn't looking, Margaret made a second list in smaller script items to relocate that mirrored the first. Her phone buzzed. A text from Sullivan subjects: "Met again with attorney. Discussed emergency petition if mother resists. Doctor referral named. Will send names separately." A second text followed with a photo taken from across a lobby. Olivia leaned toward the attorney with the intensity she had once reserved for piano recitals. Daniel's jaw set in a familiar way, the expression that had always made Margaret feel as if she were a piece of furniture to be negotiated around. Margaret dropped the phone into her pocket and turned to Lily. "One more museum task," she said lightly. "We're going to loan a few pieces to a very safe vault so they don't get damaged while the house locks are new." Like when a museum lends paintings to another museum, Lily crowed, instantly on board with the fiction. Exactly like that. They wrapped the smaller items, watches the bracelet James had given her, their last good Christmas, the sapphire pendant Olivia had once tried on, and called too classic. The larger pieces would have to wait for professional storage, but the essentials fit into the velvet pouches and then into the plastic bins, which they tucked into the trunk with an ordinary blanket draped over them. At the bank, Mr. Ruiz met them with a discreet nod and walked them to the vault, where the air felt a few degrees cooler and older. Lily watched as the two keys turned the small ceremony of security and whispered a reverent woe that made Margaret's throat constrict. They arranged the items and documents, Margaret taking photos of the box's contents with timestamps. She added a sealed envelope labeled in Charles's neat hand, affidavit and exhibits open if necessary. On the way home, they stopped at a diner where Lily ordered pancakes for dinner, and Margaret allowed herself the luxury of coffee after 4. Lily built a syrup dam. Margaret built a to-do list for Sunday baked cookies, test cameras, rehearse what to say and what not to say. She wouldn't ambush, she wouldn't perform. She would present facts like ledgers. That night, after Lily fell asleep, Margaret drafted a short note in her careful script and left it on the kitchen counter where someone coming through the back door would see it before anything else. "Welcome home. Some procedures have changed. We'll discuss them together. M." She stood for a long minute looking at the note. It was astonishing how a single sentence could feel like a locked door. Sunday afternoon moved like a cue ball, struck and inevitable. Margaret and Lily baked chocolate chip cookies because tradition stabilizes even when everything else tilts. Between timer beeps, Margaret checked the camera feeds on a slim app Charles's security consultant had installed. Discreetly placed wide-angle audio enabled in the lawful parts of the house. She tested each one, naming them like ship's foyer kitchen den. The logbook gained new entries, 2:11 p.m. tested cameras, all functioning. 2:42 p.m. confirmed flight arrival for O and D. At 6:12 p.m., 3:0 p.m. reviewed Dr. Mehta's final report excellent. 3:17 p.m. Franklin sent draft memo strong. At 5, Lily sprawled on the rug with markers and drew the new keypad as if it were a dragon guarding treasure. Margaret pretended to read and in truth reread her own script, state the facts. Do not fill silences. Do not accept framing. Use the word I more than you. Put Lily to bed before the heavy sentences. At 6:30, a text from Sullivan arrived. Subjects landed, collected luggage together. Short exchange, he said. Tonight. She said, fine. Margaret thanked her and set the phone face down. She set the Tiffany lamp's empty space in order, wiped the table where the chess set had once lived, and placed 3 documents on the kitchen counter in a neat fan, Dr. Mehta's report. Franklin's memo and the signature page of the trust with her name steady at the bottom. She slid the rest into a manila folder marked housekeeping. Neutral words could carry heavy freight. At 7:40, headlights brushed the living room wall like a memory. Lily popped up. They're here. Her voice elevated with the faith of children who assume every reunion is happy. Margaret knelt to Lily's level. When they come in, say hello, and then take your bag upstairs to set out your school things, she said gently. Grown-up conversation first, then lots of catching up, I promise. Lily nodded, pleased to have a role. The doorbell rang as the doorknob rattled without effect. Margaret's new locks did their quiet, important work. She smoothed her sweater and walked to the foyer with the composure of a conductor raising a baton. On the console table by the bowl, where keys used to live, she had placed a single unnecessary key on a blue ribbon, a visual punctuation mark. She opened the door. Olivia stood there with the effortless polish she wore like a second skin hair, smooth luggage tidy, a smile that tried and failed to reach her eyes. Daniel balanced 2 suitcases and a garment bag, his gaze sliding past Margaret's shoulder into the house, as if there might be a hidden audience. Mom, Olivia said, inserting brightness. Why are the locks? New procedure, Margaret said evenly. Welcome home. She stepped aside. The smell of cookies drifted through the hall like a line from a remembered story. Olivia crossed the threshold and out of sheer habit reached for the space where the Tiffany lamp had always been. Her hand met air. Daniel's gaze snagged on the bare rectangle of the table where the chess set once sat. Both hesitated the way people step onto a stair that isn't there. From the kitchen came the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the soft visible presence of 3 documents placed with intent. On the counter, under the soft glow of the recessed lights, the note in Margaret's hand waited with all the patience of a new rule. Lily, bouncing in place, hugged her mother around the waist, then her father, then looked up at Margaret for permission. Margaret nodded toward the staircase. School bag star, she said, keeping her tone light. As Lily's footsteps pattered upward, Margaret turned back to her daughter and son-in-law, the list in her mind aligning the new architecture standing. She felt the tremor that had lived in her hands since Lily's whisper dissolved like sugar in tea. "Kitchen," Margaret said, not unkindly. "We'll talk there." And she led them down the hallway she'd walked 1,000 times into a room where nothing and everything had changed. They followed her down the hallway, luggage wheels clicking like a metronome that had lost its beat. Margaret didn't look back. She let the house do the first talking, the new keypad by the door, the bare rectangle where the chess set used to live, the gleam of a freshly installed deadbolt at the garage. In the kitchen, everything was arranged with deliberate plainness. 3 cups, a pot of tea, a plate of still warm cookies, and fanned beneath the soft light, 3 documents, Dr. Mehta's cognitive evaluation, Franklin Ng's forensic memo, the signature page of the trust with Margaret's name steady as a plumb line. Her handwritten note sat above them, a polite flag in new terrain. "Welcome home. Some procedures have changed. We'll discuss them together." M. Olivia read the note and tried a smile that sounded like cellophane. "Mom, you're scaring me. Why are—" "Sit," Margaret said gently. Olivia sat. Daniel didn't, not at first. He prowled the room with the proprietary curiosity of a realtor at a listing, clocking angles, assessing what had moved. When he finally took the chair opposite Margaret, he did it like a man indulging a formality. Margaret poured tea for all 3, the ritual steadying and unremarkable. She didn't push the documents forward yet. She let the silence do its important work. "Lily," Olivia said, glancing toward the hallway. "Where is she?" "Upstairs," Margaret answered. "I asked her to set out her school things. We'll bring her in when we're finished." Finished with what Daniel asked, every syllable upholstered in patience. "We had a long trip. If this is about locks and lamps, I'm sure there's—" "This isn't about lamps," Margaret said. "Or locks. It's about what you did in Las Vegas." The name cut through the room like a cold blade. Olivia's eyes flickered, then held. Daniel's hand flattened on the table. "We were meeting investors," he said. "No," Margaret replied, voice level. "You were at Green & Barron. Elder law. You discussed a temporary conservatorship. You discussed an emergency petition. You discussed assisted living for me and selling this house. You discussed a Swiss academy for Lily. You also met a doctor whose name I now have." Olivia's composure fractured. "How could you possibly?" "Because I hired someone to watch," Margaret said simply. "And because your daughter warned me." Silence expanded, heavy as wet wool. Outside, a car rolled past. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked at an ordinary injustice. Daniel recovered first. "You can't prove." Margaret slid the first document across the table, Dr. Mehta's report. "This is a comprehensive cognitive evaluation conducted yesterday by an independent neurologist. It finds no impairment, no deficits, and specifically states that I am fully capable of managing complex finances and medical decisions." She slid the second Ng's memo. "This is a forensic review of my recent taxes and account statements. It identifies address changes I did not authorize, a 1099 from a firm I've never used, and signatures that resemble mine but are not. It also documents a pattern of help that laid groundwork for a petition claiming I'm overwhelmed." Olivia swallowed. Her gaze snagged on a highlighted line, "No evidence of diminished capacity. Evidence suggests third-party interference." "And this," Margaret said, placing the 3rd page in front of them, "is my executed trust. It replaces my prior will. I remain trustee while I'm competent. If my capacity is ever questioned, a panel, none of whom are family, must unanimously agree I have lost it. After that, a professional successor trustee, not any of you, manages things. There's an education trust for Lily through graduate school if she wants it. There is a no contest clause. If either of you challenges, you forfeit." Daniel's mouth thinned to a blade. "You can't cut your family out like that." "I already did," Margaret said, still gentle. "I'm not cutting family out of my life. I'm cutting you out of my finances." "We were trying to protect you," Olivia said, and to her credit, the sentence didn't curl into sarcasm. It landed like something she had rehearsed so often she believed it. "The house is a lot. The accounts, the paperwork, your—" "68," Margaret said, "not a condition. And I've run a household budget longer than you've understood compounding interest." Olivia flinched. Daniel leaned forward, switching tactics. "This is a misunderstanding. You've been anxious since Dad died. We were exploring what happens if there's a fall or a—" "Then you should have explored with me," Margaret replied. "Not around me. Not with a strategy to remove me from my home and arm yourselves with documents you coaxed or forged." The word forged hung like a spark over kindling. Daniel's eyes hardened. "Careful." "No," Margaret said, sliding Franklin's memo back to face herself. "You be careful. Because the next set of papers I file could be a police report. I'm choosing not to for now. But let's be clear about why we're here to set terms for how we proceed." Olivia grasped at the nearest rescue line. Terms. Yes, Margaret said, opening a manila folder labeled housekeeping and drawing out a single typed page. She placed it in the center like a placemat. Going forward, 1, I will not provide financial support to either of you. No emergency checks, no bridge loans. No credit cards in my name. 2, I will have regular time with Lily. Not optional, not if we're not busy. Wednesdays after school and every other weekend. 3, you will cease any efforts to interfere with my mail accounts or medical care. 4, you will acknowledge in writing that you will not file, encourage or support any petition for guardianship or conservatorship. 5, you will not attempt to alienate Lily from me or restrict our relationship as leverage. 6, there will be consequences if any of this is violated. Consequences, Daniel repeated the word sour in his mouth. Yes, Margaret said. Consequences like making our recordings and documents public in the places you care about most. Consequences like contacting professional boards if I discover more forgery. Consequences like changing the trust to skip you entirely and fund causes you'd rather not read about at the country club you can no longer afford. Olivia's breath hitched. She stared at her hands as if they were incriminating. Daniel pushed his chair back a fraction. You're blackmailing us. No, Margaret said. I'm telling the truth with receipts. That's not blackmail. That's daylight. For a moment, no one spoke. Margaret watched the pair of them without cruelty. She examined the habit of her own heart and recognized with a kind of startled grief that pity was a luxury she could no longer afford. We were worried, Olivia said at last, small and flat. I believe you were something, Margaret answered. Worry dressed up a simple hunger. Olivia winced as if the sentence had bones. From upstairs came the soft thud of a closet door. Lily arranging pencils by color the way Margaret had shown her. The vision steadied her. This can be a pivot, Margaret said, and she surprised herself by how much she meant it. You can stop chasing an image that devours you. You can live within your means, rediscover your daughter in actual hours, instead of scheduled photos, and start telling yourselves the truth again. Or you can keep moving toward the cliff you pretended was a horizon. I can't stop you. I can only refuse to be pushed. Daniel stared at the typed page, and if we refuse to sign this, then I call. Charles, Margaret said, almost conversational, and he calls a judge. And we move to restrain you from contacting my financial institutions. And we file to preserve evidence, and we notify the physician whose name you're using in your plan that he's part of a scheme. And I tell Lily the simplest version of the truth appropriate for a 9-year-old that her parents made unsafe choices with Grandma's life. I don't want to do any of that, but I will. It wasn't a threat, it was a weather report. Olivia pressed her fingertips to her temples. This is a lot. It is, Margaret said, and you brought it home. Daniel stood paced to the window and returned. He had recalibrated. Margaret could see the gear turn. When he spoke, his voice was smooth again. We won't sign anything tonight. You'll sign tonight, Margaret said. You can also take a copy to review with counsel tomorrow if you like, but the commitment goes down in ink before you sleep in this house. He almost laughed. Then he saw she meant it, and the laugh died stillborn. What about Lily? Olivia asked, reaching blindly for the one stake that still held. This schedule. What if she has piano? What if? We'll coordinate like grown-ups, Margaret said. But the principle holds. She gets me and I get her. Predictably. Olivia's eyes filled and Margaret remembered her at 8, drafting a contract in crayon. Mom promises to come to the spring concert even if it rains. She had gone. James had too. Olivia had played with hands shaking and eyes bright. Margaret folded the memory away and returned to the table. Read the page, she said. If there's a sentence you don't understand, ask. If there's a sentence you dislike, ask yourself why. They read. Daniel moved his lips the way people do when they want to absorb the exact wording. Olivia read quickly, then again more slowly, then stopped at the last paragraph. Violation of any term may result in public disclosure of evidence, legal action, and permanent removal from any future inheritance. Olivia looked up. Future inheritance. The trust handles what happens while I'm alive, Margaret said. There are still choices about what happens after. Tonight decides whether you'll ever be eligible to benefit from my estate in any way, however modest. That isn't bait. It's a measure of whether you can behave like decent people. Daniel stared at the pen she laid between them. Cheap ballpoint, unimpressive, binding. Sign, Daniel, Olivia murmured, voice hoarse. Please. He didn't move. Margaret let the clock count to 10. Then she rose, took the pen, and signed the bottom of the page, herself acknowledged by Margaret Hale, and dated it. She slid the pen back. You're next. Olivia reached first. Her signature was careful, each letter formed as if she were being graded. Daniel waited a beat longer, then took the pen and scrawled a name that had once charmed investors. It looked tired now. Margaret lifted the page, checked the ink, and nodded. She opened a second folder and removed a shorter document. This one simply acknowledges receipt of my trust summary and Dr. Mehta's report. It's not an agreement, it's a fact. You've seen them. They signed that too. Thank you, Margaret said. She meant it more than they could understand. We're done for tonight. Olivia stared at the cookies as if they might explain a different ending. May I see Lily before we go to the guest room? Of course, Margaret said, but briefly. She has school. Olivia stood, and for a moment she looked like a woman trying to climb out of a suit of armor that had rusted around her. Daniel lingered. This isn't over, he said quietly, the old blade showing through the velvet. No, Margaret said, meeting his eyes. It's just beginning, on new terms. He held her gaze a beat longer, then broke it first. Upstairs, Lily squealed at the sight of her parents as if she had forgotten they ever did anything but arrive with suitcases and hugs. She showed Olivia the neatly laid out outfit for Monday, the sharpened pencils, the drawing of a keypad dragon. Daniel kissed her forehead and promised to come to the next science fair. Put it on the calendar, Lily said seriously, and he nodded as if she had given him a map. Back in the kitchen, Margaret slid the signed paper into a clear sleeve and added it to her log. The line she wrote felt both mundane and momentous. 7:58 p.m. O&D, signed boundary agreement. She filed the originals in a metal box, then walked to the security panel and armed it for the night with a code no one else knew. She paused by the empty place where the Tiffany lamp had lived and touched the ghost of its base. Not everything absent was a loss, she thought. Sometimes absence was a sentence that kept the rest of the paragraph honest. When Olivia returned downstairs, she hesitated in the doorway. Mom, she began, then stopped. The word thinned to a breath. I thank you for not burning the house down to make a point. Margaret supplied a corner of her mouth, lifting. I prefer renovations. Olivia gave a fractured smile and for the first time in years didn't rush to fill the silence with assurances she could not keep. Guest room is made, Margaret said. Fresh sheets. We'll talk logistics in the morning. They left the kitchen together and parted at the foot of the stairs, Olivia up to the right. Daniel trailing Margaret down the hall to switch off a light that didn't need to burn. When the house settled, Margaret stood alone in the doorway, listening to the new quiet. It wasn't the quiet of an emptied life or of a woman erased. It was the quiet of boundaries finally holding of a line drawn cleanly between what could be forgiven and what would never again be permitted. She clicked the hall light off and let the darkness close like a comma instead of a period. Tomorrow would bring practicalities, calendars, and school pickup signatures at the bank, calls with Charles and Franklin, a thank you to Dr. Mehta. But tonight she allowed herself one small extravagant thought. They had come home to a different country and she was its lawful sovereign. Morning remade the house in ordinary light. Coffee steamed the faint citrus of clean sheets, a school bell waiting down the block. Margaret woke before the others and stood at the kitchen window as the street yawned itself awake. The signed page lay in her logbook where she had left it, ink-dried, line crossed. Not victory, she told herself. Governance. Olivia came down first, barefaced, hair pulled back in a way Margaret had not seen since she was 19. Lily's up, she said quiet. She wants you to braid her hair the not bumpy way. Of course, Margaret replied and went to do the small exact magic that makes a child feel seen. When Lily skipped to the bus with her lunch, in a last wave the three adults sat with calendars instead of grievances. Wednesdays and alternating weekends became blocks of color. School events went in, not as afterthoughts, but as anchors. Daniel typed for once without impatience. Charles called at 10. How did it go? They signed, Margaret said. I filed the original. We'll need to notify the bank of the boundary agreement. I'll draft a letter for Mr. Ruiz, Charles said. And Franklin's notarized memo will be on your doorstep by noon. By afternoon, Sullivan's final update arrived. Names, timestamps, locations. A neat concluding paragraph about lawful recordings and chain of custody. Margaret read it once and slid it into the vault folder. Evidence could sleep now. The next days ran on rails. Margaret moved the trust summary and Dr. Mehta's report to her safe deposit box, changed the route for all financial mail, and walked the house with a yellow pad to list what would remain where and what would not return yet. She did not bring the Tiffany lamp home. Absence could be an honest sentence. Olivia and Daniel kept to the schedule, perhaps because they feared consequences. Perhaps because ritual has a way of outlasting motive. On Wednesday, Lily appeared with a backpack full of homework and the delight of someone whose life has gained a dependable star. They baked blueberry muffins and built a diorama of the solar system with fishing line and toothpicks. When Olivia texted at 7:55 traffic. May we pick up 10 minutes late? Margaret replied with the sort of grace that don't erase rules. 10 minutes is fine. Next time, call at 7:30 if you're running behind. 2 weeks in reality knocked harder. Olivia phoned with the strained brightness of someone looking at numbers that refused to blink. The house, she said. The offer fell through. We're recalculating. Margaret waited. Silence is a teacher. We found a smaller place we could manage, Olivia continued. But the down payment is tight. I'm not asking for money. A breath. I wondered if we could sell a few pieces of the silver. The ones that would have come to me eventually. In the old life, Margaret would have reached for her checkbook, called it love, and postponed collapse. In this life, she measured and named. "I won't liquidate heirlooms," she said, "but I'll consider an advance against any future inheritance documented, reducing any share you might someday receive contingent on continued adherence to our agreement." Olivia was silent, then softly, "That's fair." Charles wrote the document in language that would not leak. Daniel signed with a careful hand. Olivia's signature looked like someone relearning a name. They did not ask for more. By March, a for sale sign leaned in front of the too-large house, like a sail finally catching wind. Olivia began volunteering twice a week at Lily's school library. Daniel called less about opportunities and more about closing a quiet listing for a couple who wanted a yard for their dog. On a Sunday afternoon, he stacked Lily's science fair board in the trunk and said without irony, "We'll be early." The trip to the mountains happened because Margaret had said it would. She booked a modest condo with a view that felt extravagant and planned days that balanced wonder with rest. A ranger-led walk where Lily learned to read tracks, a children's art class, a small observatory whose volunteer pointed out planets with patient pride. They called home at dinner the third night. Olivia's face filled the screen unvarnished and open. Daniel leaned in a little weary, a little relieved. "She's luminous," Olivia said when Lily darted to brush her teeth. "Thank you. Lily makes it easy," Margaret answered and meant it. When the call ended, she and Lily stood by the window and named the colors the sunset had invented just for them. On the last evening, they rode a gondola up to a restaurant that was mostly windows. Snow caught the dying light in a way that made Margaret think of paper held up to a lamp. Grandma Lily said, earnest spoon poised over chocolate mousse, "Can we do a trip every year?" Like a rule, Margaret felt the old impulse to hedge money health calendars. She let it pass by. "Yes," she said. A rule. Returning home did not undo the work. It would have been easy to think the mountain air had cured what lawyers and locks had only stabilized. Margaret refused magical thinking. She kept the cameras powered down but present. She kept the valuables in the vault, the inventory updated in a neat hand. She kept her log not out of paranoia, but because paper tells the truth later. Olivia and Daniel moved into the smaller house, a craftsman on a quiet street with a porch that practically asked for lemonade. It was half their former square footage and twice as warm. When Margaret visited for the first time, Lily dragged her down the hallway to a corkboard thick with school art. The family photos were not professional, they were alive. "We're still figuring it out," Olivia said in the kitchen, lining up mismatched mugs. "It's louder, smaller, but we see each other more." She stopped cheeks coloring and then did something that felt as new as the locks. She let the silence stand without selling it a story. Before Margaret left, Olivia asked, "The things you put away, the watch, the pendant, are they safe?" "They are," Margaret said. "They'll come home when the house is the right house for them." Olivia nodded. She understood that house meant more than walls. Spring tilted towards summer. On Wednesdays, Margaret taught Lily to make vinaigrette in a jar and to fold a fitted sheet badly and then a little less badly. They read the first book in a mystery series aloud, switching voices until they both dissolved laughing. Daniel texted a photo from a t-ball game with the caption, "On time." Olivia sent a picture of a library shelf with a handwritten "Recommended by Mrs. Hale's daughter" card tucked under a queue of third-grade favorites. Margaret did not forgive the past into something prettier. She did not forget that a plan had been made to lift her life off its hinges, but she allowed cautiously for the possibility that people could behave differently under new weather. She kept her state its laws, its borders, and built a few bridges that could be raised if needed. On a sun-washed Saturday, she and Lily planted herbs in a narrow bed by Margaret's back steps. They labeled each with popsicle sticks, basil, mint, thyme. Lily pressed the soil around the mint and looked up. "Grandma, are we okay now?" "We are okay today," Margaret said, rinsing her hands with the hose. "And we are making choices that help tomorrow be okay too." Lily considered this, then nodded as if they had signed something. She leaned into Margaret's side and smelled of damp earth and soap. That evening, as shadows drew the street into soft edges, Margaret took the long way to the kitchen, past the quiet space on the entry table where a lamp would someday belong again. The security panel slept, the new lock shone the note on the first page of her logbook, "Governance not victory held." She brewed tea and carried it to the porch. Across the way, a neighbor waved. Down the block, a child laughed the rectangle of a laugh you can find even with your eyes closed. Margaret sipped, breathed, and allowed herself a small, unadorned contentment. The country she owned now was modest and well-run. Its borders were clear, its bridges worked, and somewhere in a safe future waited, polished, patient, returning when it was truly time to come home. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.